So, we might get started with Laurel Edwards, who's our General Manager of Independence and Community. That you walk away with some information that is really helpful for you now and into the future. So, for some of you may know and some of you may not, but the OC Connections family has a long and proud history in the accommodation area. So most of you may be aware of the redevelopment of 1 and 9 Allen Street, and it leading to all our facilities now being based in the community. So all our shared accommodation or group homes or houses, whatever term you know them by, are now based in the community and scattered around the southeastern suburbs, mostly in reasonable distance to this facility. We currently run 12 shared accommodation facilities. All those are registered for supported independent living, known as SIL, and supported disability accommodation, whether that registration sits with us or it sits with the person who we lease the properties from. It exists. So that means that anyone who moves into those houses currently has SIL, supported independent living, and supported disability accommodation in their NDIS plan. So the reality is, in order to move into our premises, our preference is that people are funded for both of those types of support. As well as our group homes, we run a number of innovative programs from people's own homes. So we go into individuals' homes, or we have a shared living arrangement where 4 people currently live under the one roof, share and combine their supports to make it work for them as a group and individually. We also have a number of one-to-one programs. One that is at one end of the scale, which is 24 hours a day, and some that are 4 hours a week. So there is a continuum of support that we provide to people out there in the community. We also have our short-term accommodation and assistance venue, which is just outside the window, behind the fence there. So it accommodates 3 people at any given time. So as you can imagine, you know, the demand starts to build when it comes to short-term accommodation. People are eager for a break. They often have it within their plans so they can book time for themselves and for their child or loved one to have a break or a holiday. Many people who have time in the house see it as a holiday, which is great. You know, obviously because of the location of it, there are some issues with the support that we can provide to individuals. So we do take a very thorough approach at intake to determine who is appropriate and who isn't. But I'm going to let Erina tell you a little bit more about the short-term accommodation, about our shared accommodation and our in-home programs, because she is the lady that is responsible for the day-to-day runnings of those programs, and the teams of staff who come in and out of people's homes and lives to afford the level of support that individuals have asked for and need on a day-to-day basis. So, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to throw over to Erina, and feel free at any time to ask us any questions. Thank you.
SIL, STA, SDA, it's all very confusing for families, and it can be quite complex navigating the planning process and then trying to tap into supports that are going to suit your loved one. And we're here and we take a lot of pride in helping families to navigate this system and to get to a place where we can support them in a range of different ways, to develop skills, to prepare people for perhaps living a more independent life, perhaps not with the family, in their own home or in a home with other people. And we do that by lots of different areas of support really, and it really just depends on the needs of the person as to what kind of support is going to suit you best at this particular time. Supported independent living is our group homes, and we have anywhere between 3 and 6 people living in a home that's staffed according to the registration of the property, so low, standard or high support needs. And low might be a house where 3 people live together and they might have staff coming in to support them in the morning or in the afternoon, and they might not need overnight support, they might be fine, or we might have systems in place so that if they need that support, we can get support to them. Individual supports are more goal-based support, so in your plan you've got really overarching, usually very broad goals, and families want to get more specific about those goals and what people want to achieve, and they usually ask us to provide individual support to do that, and that can be offered really as you want it. So it could be around a 1 day a week or a few hours from time to time, depending on what your needs are. Usually in the community or in a community program, or tapping people into local groups, clubs, different organisations that aren't necessarily from the home, community-based programs, and tapping into a person's interests and passions. And we always find that people generally thrive when they're doing things that they love to do, and they're being supported in a way that's person-centred, individualised support, and that's respectful, dignified, and that we're treating people as equals and as adults in the community. So that's individual supports, and individual supports are usually provided maybe to a person who lives in a group home but doesn't necessarily always want group supports. In-home supports is really exciting. It's an area where we're having a lot of growth and demand. It's for people who either live in their own home or live still with family, and family would like us to come in and do a lot of work around skill development and building skills so that the person can live a more independent life. And we've had some really fantastic outcomes with our in-home support program. It's usually really quite intense. It's very goal driven, and we try to match people up with support workers who are going to really make true connection with the person, and so that they are really working in partnership together to achieve the same goal. And we do that with this co-achieve model of support. The information is on our website, but the co-achieve model of support really is about understanding behaviour, understanding communication, and understanding what's driving a person, so that we can do our best to meet that person exactly where they are in their life and work in partnership with them to achieve some really fantastic outcomes. And that's what really the NDIS is all about. It's an outcomes-driven scheme where funding is based on certain goals. And that works perfectly with our model of support with the co-achieve. Short-term accommodation is really exciting for us, and we are loving being able to provide this support. We have always provided it in one form or another, but it has been in a congregate care setting, so it's been quite limited with the opportunities for independence and the opportunities for skill building. And possibly in the past it's more about either the person having a break from the family or mum and dad having a bit of time out. Now we're really moving into skill development, preparing people to live a more independent life away from mum and dad, perhaps. And, you know, we're seeing fantastic achievements, and it's as much a support to the family as it is to the person, because sometimes families need to be prepared as well for the person gaining more independence. And we've got people who pack their bag, they know when it's time to come and stay, they know they'll ring mum at night and say, "Mum, I'm fine, relax, everything's good." And we're learning just fantastic skills, from how to put a doona cover on, to how to use the washing machine, how to navigate the public transport system, parents have had holidays where they haven't had holidays or been together as a family for 20 years. And they've built up over a 12-month period of small visits, building up to overnight stays, building up to a weekend, and then 2 weeks away. And I said to this mum, call me if you need, email if you need. I didn't hear from her once. So she was confident. It took a while for her to say, she'll be fine, everything will be okay, we'll let you know. If things are not going well, we'll let you know. We'll let you know. So building up the skills of the person, building up the relationship with the family, gaining that trust, gaining that confidence, for both the family and the person is what short-term accommodation and assistance is all about. And we just relish in seeing people achieve their goals, and we spread it far and wide. It's something that we're really, really happy about, pleased about. And, we're seeing some of our people who I never ever thought would leave. I thought Mum will never ever get to the point, or Dad won't get to the point where they're ready for this person to live a more independent life, and we're seeing people now interested in our SIL model of support. So they're trusting in the process and in the development of their loved one, and they know that they're ready for that next step, which is fantastic. So it is a lot. It can be complicated, it can be overwhelming, but I suppose the main message is that we are here to help you navigate this. So at any time, families will call up and we can give them information. If you're interested in short-term accommodation, we'll take you up and give you a tour, and you can talk to our staff about what kind of things you can expect. But like Clarelle said, it is on a main road. It is at the moment predominantly a 1-to-3 ratio. Because of that, I think once people have a lot more higher support ratios, it becomes a little bit more difficult, more tricky. Doesn't mean we can't continue to support the person in other ways. And certainly I'm excited about these programs growing, particularly in home support and short-term accommodation. So,
that's great.
Has anyone got any questions?
Have you looked into the options of non-traditional settings, so taking a group away to stay in a B&B or in cabins somewhere or that sort of thing, rather than sort of here it is and this is the only location?
Yes. Yeah. So we are always looking at alternative ways, and that there are some things that are potential opportunities for the future, but we are building this model first, and I think once we're confident that we're providing an excellent standard of service, and I know we are now, but to build and to grow from there, and build the team, get families on board with that different approach. We are already being really creative and flexible about how people have holidays, because that can be something that planners aren't so open to, providing funding for a person to go on a holiday, even though a person, all of us will hopefully have a holiday every year. They see it as more of a luxury thing to have in the plan. So we get quite creative about how we use creative within the scope of the, we're not doing anything that's untoward, but we say to people, how do you want to spend this money? What do you want to achieve? And let's help you to do that. So that might be, we supported a lovely lady to visit her brother in Perth. Now, previously that never could have happened. Her brother was always had to come here. He got to share his family, his children, his community with this lady. She had the best time of her life, and really is still raving about it. So it is about two brothers, both with disabilities, having a weekend away at Phillip Island. Possibly could not afford to do that if they had to pay for-profit provider to do that, but we could provide those supports within their package. So it really is about tailoring to your needs, really.
And I think it's probably fair to say too, the people that Erin is speaking about are people who are currently having high levels of support in their housing. So they're people who have got significant levels of support. Tonight we're really pleased to have Penny Stevenson, who's the project coordinator from Summer Foundation. Penny's been kind enough to come and talk to us about about specialist disability accommodation, how you get that into your plan, some of the tricks of the trade, I suppose, Penny, is what we're needing to get from you, but also around the housing hub. The housing hub is very new, and it's the way that vacancies are advertised, and it would be fair to say that most people don't really have their head around that yet. So Penny's here to share her knowledge, and I'm very, very grateful for you to do that tonight.
So I come from the Summer Foundation, and basically their main mission in life is to keep young people out of residential aged care. And what we mean by young people is anyone under the age of 65, and even if they've got an NDIS plan after that. If you don't want to be in residential aged care, we don't believe that you should be in there. And so, and we end up supporting a lot of young people, or people who might be living with aged carers, and that care is not sustainable, and so helping to find them good options. We've got a sister company called Summer Housing, and they are now an SDA developer. And so a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment here in Victoria is partnering with them to get people into their particular style of living. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. I'm going to be talking about the housing hub that we've already touched on. I'm also going to be talking about the NDIA process for getting SDA funding, what that means, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start by talking about the housing hub, and then I'm going to be moving on to SDA, Specialist Disability Accommodation. Next one. So the housing hub is basically meant to be like realestate.com or one of those big housing sites for people with disability and disability service providers who are looking to find tenants. Next slide. So basically there was this sort of question about how do people with disability find places to live, and because you can't search on realestate.com very well, you might be able to sort of click wheelchair accessible somewhere in the search things, but you can't really drill it down. And also, if you are a provider of accommodation for people with disabilities, or you happen to have a really accessible house, maybe you built it for your mother and she's now moved into residential aged care and you've got this fantastic property sitting there, how do you find tenants for that? So that's how we really came to be to design the housing hub. So yeah, it began around the trial sites in 2017, and it's expanding across Australia. And yes, we're hoping that it will continue to be the place where everyone comes to look. There are some other people on the market, but we're the best. And we have most of the people, we have a really good lot of a network of support coordinators and people with disabilities and families who know about us, and we also have a really great lot of people who know about how to put their houses on, and it's free, so we love that. So when you come to the homepage, you get very much a screen that looks like this. Are you looking for a house, or are you looking for tenants? And in probably most of your cases, you're going to be clicking on the left-hand side and looking for a home. Next page, please. So it's find a home, and you can choose, where do I want to find a home? Do I want to choose ACT, New South Wales, Queensland, Vic? That's the really amazing thing that we're finding about the NDIS. The biggest change is now your house is no longer linked to your service provider. So the in-home support that you need, they're no longer tied together. It used to be that a disability provider would buy a house and they would provide all of the support in there. Now under NDIS, you can choose the supports that you want. So if you happen to live, we've got a lot of people living in Urella housing, for example, and theoretically you should be able to say, actually, I'd like a different service provider to come and provide my supports to me. What this also means is that you can look for a house in other states. So you're not tied to a location anymore. And so we've got some people who are looking to move to Melbourne, and we're supporting them to put in their applications and make that happen, hopefully. Okay, so then once you've clicked on Victoria, you can then drill down to what sort of rough geographic location you would like. Yep, next one please. And then there's some options that you can choose. So you can change the filters, but Specialist Disability Accommodation. So that means stuff that is funded by the NDIS. On the Housing Hub, there are properties that are non-SDA funded. So things that people who perhaps don't have the high level of, or don't meet the eligibility criteria for SDA funding, there's still properties that you can look at and search for. In that search filters box, you can just untick Specialist Disability Accommodation, SDA, and that will show you all the properties that are available that aren't funded under the SDA criteria. The word SDA gets thrown around a lot, and you can use it to talk about the bricks and mortar. So the actual building, what it looks like, what design category it is, whether it's a house, a villa, a duplex or an apartment, and then you can actually use it to talk about the money. So I need SDA funding in my plan, I currently have SDA funding in my plan, and tonight I'm going to start by talking about the funding and the payments, and then I'm going to talk about the bricks and mortar. Okay, SDA eligibility. Okay, sounds like for a lot of you though, you've got a clear in. Previously lived in SDA. Anybody currently living in a group home has SDA funding in their plan, and they can stay that way for as long as they want. Now, most of the stock that is out there, particularly any of the larger group homes with more than 6 people in it, they are likely to be categorised as basic. So that's basic funding. So it's only a very small amount of money actually gets paid from the NDIA to the housing providers, because they're well established and the bricks and mortar are already there and they've been around probably for 20 years or something like that. So they don't actually attract a lot of NDIS funding. So if you are wanting to move from the place that you're currently living, you might actually need to have a plan review and go to the NDIA panel to be reassessed for SDA funding to get a bit more money into your plan so that you can move into a different type of accommodation. So that's something that you just might need to talk to your support coordinators about. But it might be that you're really happy with the options. Like, it sounds like the options that are here are really great. There's small numbers of people, sounds like really good support. So, that sounds really fantastic. For people who haven't yet got SDA in the funding, there's 2 major pathways. So there's pathway 1, this is the one that I'm usually typically dealing with. So people who have extreme functional impairment in either mobility, self-care or self-management, and very high person-to-person support needs. Now the big question is, what does extreme mean? There's no guidelines. Basically we're often thinking about, is there anyone worse? Can we think of someone worse? And it's, of course, extreme means that you can't, even with adaptive technology, that you still have that impairment, there's still things that you can't do. So largely the people that I'm working with are in wheelchairs, usually motorised wheelchairs, requiring ceiling hoists for transfers, and require in excess of about 6 hours one-on-one person-to-person support a day. So they're usually sort of this category here. It might be that you have people who do have very high support needs. So maybe in excess of 6 hours a day one-on-one support. And it's possible that their informal care is not available or not sustainable, so living with ageing carers, or that they're at a risk to themselves or others. So, you know, having some behaviours of protest or behaviours of concern or whatever it might be. So they're all the sort of, when we look at, are you eligible for SDA? They're all the things that we're talking about. And these are basically taken out of the SDA rules. So this pathway here is Rule 3.5 and 3.6. This pathway over here is Rule 3.7 and 3.8. And unfortunately, it's not everybody with a disability. Not everybody with a disability is going to be eligible for SDA funding or an SDA housing. So it really comes down to that very high need for person-to-person support. So if you can live at home or in a house, doesn't have to be at home, but if you can live in a property and just have people come and drop by day to day, then that's not SDA. But that can still be funded under your NDIS package. It's just not SDA. So that's that sort of SIL model. And the really great thing to know is that there's also some potential really interesting possibilities going to be coming up. You might have seen an article recently about a person who was got in a border, and they were, I think, a student at uni, and she's bedbound, and she was able to, use him to sort of provide some support around the home. And there's the potential for some of those things to start happening under the NDIS too, but it's a sort of wait and see. It'll probably be coming towards the end of this year. So there are some really great, exciting potential changes still to come in the way that supports can be provided to people, and potentially also be able to pay the rent. For people who might want to live in the inner city but can't afford the rent, they might also be able to then co-share with somebody else who then provides in-kind supports. But it's only sort of, they're whispers in the wind at the moment. So I sort of started to talk about extreme functional impairment. So that's things like getting in and out of bed, getting dressed, moving around, preparing meals, accessing the community. And self-management might be help planning, help with organisation, those sort of things. So extreme functional impairment can be a lot of things. The thing that we get hung up about is that word extreme. What makes it extreme in comparison to high? That's the thing that we need really good supporting evidence. So we're often getting really good reports from OTs, from neuropsychologists, anyone who can help us explain to the NDIA that the person actually does have this extreme functional impairment. Okay, next one please. So very high support needs. So that's that your informal supports can't meet your care needs anymore, or that it's not appropriate. Are you getting into your 50s and your parents are in their 80s, and actually you don't really want your parents helping you get dressed in the mornings, and that it's not sustainable. You've spent a long time in group home or residential aged care, or you have behaviours of risk. So that's that sort of secondary, that pathway that I was talking about. So now we're talking about bricks and mortar. So NDIS is really trying to stop any large group homes from being built anymore. They are not going to be funding any buildings over, I think, housing about 5 people together. So they're really interested in having people out in the community and in smaller style housing rather than large scale group homes. And they're very, there's lots of different options that you can have: houses, duplex, villas, apartments. The work that I'm doing at the moment with summer housing is 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartments. And they're sort of peppered through an apartment complex, but they have an 11th apartment that has on-site support. That's a 24-hour concierge model, so people can press a button or use their voice to activate the support system and have people come and help. So as I was saying before, around the funding, there's these different design categories. So most likely, if you've currently got SDA funding in your plan, it's likely to be at the basic level. The next sort of step up, I suppose, is improved livability. And that's where it's basically, your normal kind of house, but perhaps has some nice design features if it's a newer build. So it might have good lighting, good access through the home, but it's pretty much like anything that's on the market at the moment. There's a category called robust, and that's for people who might have some behaviours. It has reinforced walls, soundproofing, extra soundproofing, retreat areas for staff or other residents. If someone is behaving aggressively, there's sort of ways people can get out, really nice clear lines of sight throughout the house. So that's robust. The next sort of category is fully accessible, and that's where we're starting to think about people in wheelchairs or using walking aids. So wider doorways, better circulation space, adjustable bench heights, bathrooms. It has the potential to be fitted with adaptive technology to make features easier to use. And then the sort of highest category that attracts the most funding is this high physical support. And that's the area that we're tending to work in at the moment because that's typically Summer Foundation's bread and butter. So that's, the doorways are much wider, about 950 millimetres. They're ready to be fitted with adaptive technology. They've got heating and cooling provisions. And the ability to call for support, and they've got backup emergency generators as well. So for people needing ventilation or have technology that they're absolutely reliant on, they've got some 2-hour backup batteries and generators and stuff like that. One of the things that's really quite exciting is the smart home technologies that can be fitted as required. So people can access the lift using their tablet, so they can let support workers in from the ground floor up to the lift to let them in, and then let them in through their doors, all without really having to move anywhere or open the doors physically. Absolutely needs to be customised to the people's needs. So as I was saying, our model has 24-hour on-site support, and so that's that SIL that we're talking about. There's funding that comes from the NDIS for the actual building, there's funding that comes for the SIL support, and then there's also funding that comes for the planned everyday support, so helping people get out of bed, get dressed, go into the community. So there's sort of 3 different funding types that can be used to have people living in these homes. These are some pictures of our beautiful apartments that we've got, so anyone who thinks that they're that they might have people who are eligible for high physical support apartments. We're currently taking applications. Just more pictures about Botanic. I thought I deleted all of these, but they'll be ready next year. Yay! Beautiful on Coventry Street, right opposite the Shrine. Keep going. Docklands, right opposite Southern Cross Station. Hooray! The thing that is coming in the new year is Summer Housing are building some apartments in Heidelberg, and they'll have a mixture of high physical support but also fully accessible. And it's likely to have that same model of 24-hour concierge support. 10 plus 1 extra apartment for that on-site support to live in. Summer Foundation has some really fantastic resources online about how to write a housing plan, the My Housing Preferences, sample NDIS plans, all sorts of stuff, really great resources. And we also run workshops for support coordinators and OTs. So, you know, if you happen to have a support coordinator from a different organisation who doesn't know much about SDA, it might be worthwhile encouraging them to go along to the upskill workshops because they're fantastic. Yep. And that's just some more of the material that we've got on our website. Yep, keep going. So yeah, really important that you get a housing plan written. So the process is that basically once you work out what kind of accommodation that your child or whoever it is that you might be supporting wants to live in, do they want to live by themselves? Would they prefer actually to live with somebody else? Where do they want to live? So hearing about their preferences is really, really important to the NDIA, that they really like to hear the personal stories of people. And yeah, then also getting those really good reports written by OTs and other health professionals to justify why that housing preference is going to be the right match for that person. And then it gets taken, there's a specialist panel now under the NDIA. So they're people that just deal with housing day after day after day. And they're getting really good at it. So they're getting really good at making good determinations. And they're actually making the right decisions for people. So it's quite, you know, with all of the other things that we hear about the NDIS, it's actually quite exciting that this panel seems to be doing a good job in a timely manner. So you've got SDA. You know that you can now look at improved livability, or you can look at fully accessible. You've got that category of housing in your plan. You know that you've actually been approved for 1 bedroom, or you've been approved for a 3-bedroom home. All of it comes down to that sort of specifics. So you can get on the Housing Hub and have a look at what's there. And you can then actually just contact, there'll be a little inquiries button for every property, and that will trigger, you fill in a little eligibility form or something like that, and that will trigger the housing provider to contact you. So in our case, it's me. I call you for any of our properties, and we have an application process because there's quite a lot of interest in the properties that we've got, of course. And so it's just going to depend housing provider to housing provider what their process is, but it might be that there's some kind of application process. But you'll deal with the individual providers one-on-one from there. We are very reactive. We have housing developers say, we've got 10 or 20 apartments built to high physical support, and we have to find tenants. What we're wanting to start doing is being able to capture people, their housing preferences, and start being able to go to developers and say, actually, we've got 20 people who want to live around Ferntree Gully that want robust, or that they want fully accessible. And we're finding that sometimes there's people who might fall into somewhere between 2 design categories. You know, they might be fully accessible, they might be in a wheelchair, but they might also need to have a bit more robustness in their design. And that's some of the things that we're not quite seeing there in the market. And I think whatever happens is it's about contacting the providers, and for the places that are already built, going and having a look. Because one of the things that I think we could possibly be doing better, and we do try to keep on track of them, is actually having a look at the properties and making sure that the photos that people are putting up are a good representation of what's actually happening. And we do get feedback from time to time that actually we went and saw that place and that photo didn't do it justice. So I do always think that it's worth checking those properties out. So the parts that come out of your NDIS plan is there's that contribution that comes for the SDA part, there's the part that comes from the SIL, and then there's your plan supports. That all comes out of your NDIS package. The stuff that comes out of your own pocket is there's a 25% contribution from your DSP. And then there's also rent assistance if you get it. And then all of your food, utilities, internet, all of that stuff comes out of your expense. So it is a very different model than what people who've been living in a group home are used to, because there's a lot more budgeting that needs to be undertaken. So it's perhaps that support needs to go into their plan to help them with that financial support. And again, all of that skill building and things that might need to happen before someone's ready to actually take this step. They're all things that need to be taken into consideration. But the things that we can, say is you're living in the city, and there's all of those great amenities at there's a swimming pool that at both South Bank and Docklands that has a hoist available, and a big gym facility going to be at Docklands, as well as a supermarket on site, lots of parkland, blah blah blah, and all of those body corporate fees get paid by the landlord. So there's sort of swings and roundabouts. So that's us. I didn't bring any business cards because they were on the wrong desk at the wrong time in the wrong office. I think Vicky's got all my details.